Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course U.S. History, and today we leave behind the world of industry and corporations to talk about the wild, wild West. Spoiler alert! You have died of dysentery. And in the process, we're going to explore how all of us, even those of us who are vegans or eat sustainably produced food, benefit from massive agribusiness that has its roots in the wild, wild West. The West still looms large in American mythology as the home of cowboys and gunslingers and houses of ill repute and freedom from pesky government interference, but in fact,
it was probably not as wild as we've been told. Ugh, Mr. Green, why can't America live up to its myths just once?
Because this is America, me from the past, home to Hollywood and Gatsby and Honey Boo Boo. We are literally in the myth-making business. So before the Hollywood Western, the myth of the frontier probably found its best expression in Frederick Jackson Turner's 1893 lecture, The Significance of the Frontier in American History. Turner argued that the West was responsible for key characteristics of American culture, beliefs in individualism, political democracy, and economic mobility. Like, for 18th and 19th century Americans, the Western frontier represented the opportunity to start over, and possibly to strike it rich by dint of one's own individual effort, even back when the West was like Ohio. In this mythology, the West was a magnet for restless young men who lit out for the uncorrupted, unoccupied, untamed territories to seek their fortune. But in reality, most Western settlers went not as individuals, but as members of a family or as part of an immigrant group. And they weren't filling up unoccupied space either, because most of that territory was home to American Indians. Also, in addition to Easterners and migrants from Europe, the West was settled by Chinese people and by Mexican migrant laborers and former slaves. Plus, there were plenty of Mexicans living there already who became Americans with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And the whole West as a place of rugged individualism and independence turns out to be an oversimplification. I mean, the federal government, after all, had to pass the law that spurred homesteading, then had to clear out American Indians already living there, and had to sponsor the railroads that allowed the West to grow in the first place. About as individualistic as the government buying Walden Pond for Henry David Thoreau. What's that? It's a state park now? The government owns it? Well, there you go. Now, railroads didn't create the desire to settle the West, but they did make it possible for people who wanted to live out west to do so for two reasons. First, without railroads, there would be no way to bring crops or other goods to market. I mean, I guess you could dig a canal across Kansas, but if you've ever been to Kansas, that is not a tantalizing proposition. Second, railroads made life in the West profitable and livable because they brought the goods that people needed, such as tools for planting and sowing, shoes for wearing, books for putting on your shelf and pretending to have read. Railroads allowed settlers to stay connected with the modernity that was becoming the hallmark of the industrialized world in the 19th century. Now, we saw last week that the federal government played a key role in financing the Transcontinental Railroad, but state governments got into the act too, often to their financial detriment. In fact, so many states nearly went bankrupt financing railroads that most states now have constitutional requirements that they balance their budgets. But perhaps the central way that the federal government supported the railroads and Western settlement and investment in general was by leading military expeditions against American Indians, rounding them up on ever smaller reservations and destroying their culture.